Hello everyone. I want to talk to you today about the Velit camper air conditioner unit that we have in this 1974 Versatile 800 because we're very happy with it. We've been using it for a little bit now. We put this in June of 2024. It is now October of 2025, which, yes, I know it's a bit late in the year to talk about air conditioning, but if it bothers you that much, then I advise watching this video in June or July of 2026, and this will seem more relevant. But I don't think it bothers most, if any of you, all that much, if at all. So, anyway, the Velit here has been on for a while, and we've run it in all kinds of interesting conditions, and it has performed well. We do like it. That's kind of the overview here. I'll have a link to it down below if you want to go check it out, if you want to buy it. Little pricey, but quite frankly, it does a good job, and we're very happy with it, and it's a far sight better than what this tractor had when we got it, which was, oh man, that was ridiculous. For context here on why we went with a completely self-contained camper air conditioner, not just an off-road, quote-unquote off-road air conditioning unit made for a tractor or a truck. We actually went with a real camper unit. That is 8,000 BTUs. It's, a small air conditioner, like for your house. It's pretty serious for a cab that small. The reason we went with that is several fold, if you will. The biggest reason is the air conditioning system that came with this tractor when we got it, which is not the same as the air conditioning system this tractor had from the factory, which, by the way, because this is a 74 Versatile, this is an earlier one. The factory air conditioning system was optional and wasn't that good. The previous owners of this had taken that optional, not very good air conditioning system. They had the lower evaporator blower motor assembly in the cab from the factory. Then they added an upper one, aftermarket evaporator and blower motor. And you might think, oh, well, what happened to the lower one? Oh, nothing. It still worked. They just tied two of them together because I guess if one wasn't enough, they thought running a second one off the same system was a good idea. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. And they hooked those up. They replaced the York-style compressor with a Sandin conversion, which I have nothing against a Sandin compressor, but a York-style in this application was much, much better, and they didn't do that. So we had all that going for us, and then to make matters worse, they didn't even bother to change the condenser. Now, the condenser was this giant round thing that bolted to those two brackets right there on the back of the cab. And you might say, well, where was the fan at to run air over the condenser and cool off the refrigerant so that the system actually worked? Oh, the fan was just a little, not quite a squirrel cage, but it was just an electric fan that sat in the elements outside, and it was extremely tiny relative to the size of the condenser. So the whole system that was in this thing did not work. It sucked. At first, it didn't work very well. And when I say it didn't work very well, I mean it barely would work good enough at best to stop you from dying. And I'm being literal here. You could leave the doors and windows shut. You could run this thing. You could even run it in the afternoon, but you'd still sweat real bad. It would keep it 95 to 100 degrees in the cab instead of 150, which would kill you. And so at first, that's what we had to deal with. Then it quit working. We tried to mess with it. I have a few older videos about that, but they suck, so you don't need to go watch them. We couldn't get it to work, so then we just gave up on trying to have air conditioning altogether. And we left a blower motor in there, and then eventually that thing burned up. So then towards the end of, towards the time where we put the Velit in, this thing not only had no air conditioning, it didn't even have a blower motor. So you just had to run with the doors and windows open and eat it. And the problem is, some of you who run heavy equipment can probably relate to this, some of you who are older farmers especially. The problem isn't so much the heat. All right, you can get used to the heat. I mean, on a farm, you got to be outside in the heat one way or another anyway. It's the dust. The dust is what kills you, and that is why an enclosed cab is extremely nice. And if you're going to have an enclosed cab, you got to have air conditioning or you will cook yourself to death. That's not an exaggeration. So it was not fun for Dad and I, either one, mostly Dad, to eat dust. It wasn't fun. at all. We didn't like it. And so when times changed enough that we could put air conditioning in this, we had a couple of options before us. And those options were to either completely, well, I mean, we'd mostly completely stripped all the old air conditioning out by this point. But our option was to either go in all new, not the way the previous owners had it, not the way the factory had it, the way it should have been done from the factory, with a proper condenser in the front where the engine fan can pull air over it. It's got more surface area to release heat, a real compressor, all new lines, a new evaporator and blower motor assembly in the top. All this stuff. Go in completely brand new, charge it up, and go. Or we could do what we ended up doing, which was buy an air conditioning unit intended for a camper. Initially, we looked at off-road, quote-unquote off-road, air conditioning units. They were not self-contained, though, and some of them were all for alternating current, and so that would have made the electrical system extremely complex. We would have been dealing with transformers or converters, and we would have had to have a much bigger alternator and all this other stuff that was ridiculous. You would have had to run an auxiliary compressor. You still would have had an auxiliary condenser, and it just kind of defeated the purpose. So we looked at camper units, which we knew were self-contained, because on a camper, they have to be self-contained, right? And looking around a little bit, managed to find one that was for direct current instead of alternating current. And yeah, bought it, got it here, hooked it up. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Works great. Much cheaper, much easier than replacing all this stuff with a factory-style off-road AC system that maybe would have performed a little bit better, but wasn't worth the effort and the cost, in our opinion. On our way up into the cab here, just for clarification and a little bit of additional context, at the time we put the Velit air conditioning unit in this tractor, this was our only operating tractor. This is the tractor that pulled not just its weight, but the weight that other machines probably should have been pulling as well. And it's done a good job for us, and we love this thing, but no air conditioning made it really difficult to operate. And like I said, because it was our only tractor, we didn't have time. We still don't have a lot of time. It's better than it used to be, but especially back then, you know, even a year ago, we did not have time to screw with putting in a new condenser and having the lines made and figuring out an evaporator and plumbing in all the electrical and plumbing in all the lines. Especially because by the time we ordered this, since it took a month to get here, when we put this in, we were also trying to get that combine ready, and we just got that combine delivered. Yes, it had sat in the guy's shed. It shouldn't have needed a lot. It kind of didn't, but we didn't know that, so we were trying to go over it and get it ready so we could cut rye. So we hastily installed this thing, and that's one of the reasons we ordered it this way, is because all we had to do was cut a hole in this panel here, drop this in, hook the wires up to the battery, and go. And the rest is history. So in hooking this thing up, like I said, we cut a hole in this plate. So something I forgot to mention, the factory air conditioning system on these older Versatiles, it came with a cab pressurizer, which sat right here where this cover plate is at. They cut a hole in the steel of the cab roof from the factory and put this cab pressurizer in. It was not an HVAC unit, it was just simply a pressurizer. I'm not sure of the specifics. I believe it was just basically a fan and maybe a filter assembly. And then your actual air conditioning unit sat right there on the wall. That's where your evaporator core and your blower motor was for that. Like most of these older Versatiles, the cab pressurizer has long since disappeared, and a cover plate was installed in its place. So when we got ready to put the Velit in, that's one of the many reasons we decided to go with it. Self-contained, easy to install. We don't have to cut a hole in the steel. We didn't have to cut a hole in the steel. We just had to cut a hole in this aluminum plate, which was pretty easy because it's sacrificial anyway, and plop this thing in. Now, you notice it sags here. So yes, all the condensation that comes off of this does go right down into the cab. Again, this was hastily installed. We do plan to fix that when we completely redo the cab, which, believe it or not, we still haven't had a lot of time for. But yes, that's why this looks like this. If we had more time, we would not have installed it this way. This is extremely, how should I say this? It's extremely temporary, which in the agricultural world, anything that's temporary that works is now permanent. So It definitely needs some improvements. But hey, like I said, it does work. So getting this in, hooking it up to the battery is pretty easy. Just by the way, these are fusible links here, so that if something happens, these links will blow. I believe they sent extras, though I probably have lost them by now because some stuff has been moved quite a few times since we put this in. But anyway, yeah, like I said, this is, get you the specs here. This is a 2000R air conditioner. It is 12 volt, 40 to 60 amp. They do have a 24 volt version with, of course, lower amperage, because as voltage increases, amperage decreases, and vice versa, which is why your fuses have an amperage rating on your direct current systems. 134A refrigerant. It does come with service ports. Like I said, it is 8,000 BTU, which, yeah, for a cab this size might be overkill if you're just looking at square foot or cubic foot. But when you factor in all the glass and the fact that this thing's uninsulated, 8,000 BTU is the minimum, the bare minimum. So when we get this thing insulated, 8,000 BTU should keep it pretty comfortable in here. And this weighs 66 pounds. So it's not bad. You know, it, like I said, it does sag because of the way we installed it. It is kind of heavy. Where it rests and comes in, that's to be expected. The biggest problem, though, is that even our half-assed installation would have looked a lot better if that cover plate had been steel instead of aluminum, but it's not, so, you know, we just worked with it. Performance is, of course, pretty good. The only real complaint I have with it is that the airflow is not very good. Secondary complaint is that it only goes down to 60. That's the lowest you can set this, which honestly 60 degrees coming out of that, and it doesn't cycle very much. You know, it blows cold air pretty regularly when it's hot outside. We've run this thing when it's 103, 104 out in lots of dust and not a lot of wind, and it kept up. It kept the cab, fairly comfortable. I mean, again, non-insulated, lots of glass. I would say ambient temperature in here, 80, 85. I was running this last summer. I was doing some disking, and I sweat a little bit, but not horrible. Not like with this thing and that thing in here. They were no help at all. So, you know, it wasn't bad. Obviously, it's not as comfortable as you want, but, well, you kind of need some insulation and better sealing technology if you're going to have ideal thermal retention in your operator station, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, performance is good. Only goes down to 60, but hey, 60 degrees is better than 95 or 100. Airflow kind of sucks, which is why we have the auxiliary fan. We hooked up a power inverter. That came from Walmart, by the way, and I didn't order it. Dad did, so I couldn't give you a link even if I wanted to, because I'm not sure I could find the exact right one. But it came from Walmart, if you were curious. This was just a set of copper jumper cables. These are, I believe, 6 gauge. That we hooked the inverter up with. Yes, it's overkill because all we're running is a fan, but we also had grand visions of putting like a little microwave in here so that we could have a snack if we got. I'm just kidding. It was for the fan and then a phone charger if a fella needed to charge his phone up or whatever. So yeah, with that plumbed in and that fan there, it works pretty good. So with all this stuff, like I said, this is running at 40 to 60 amps. With all this stuff hooked up and running, it pegs out the amp meter on the tractor. I don't know what size the alternator is, but we definitely need a bigger one. I want to say the alternator on this 800 is 95 amps. So it will keep up. I mean, you know, it won't drain the batteries and shut the tractor off or anything while you're running, but you do need to make sure that you let this idle with everything off, high idle, for about 15 to 20 minutes when you're done for the day, so that you charge the batteries back up a little bit, because if you don't, the tractor won't start the next day, and that is a problem. The longer you run this, if you run this all day, like 8 to 10 hours, probably let this thing high idle for about 30 minutes before you shut her down. With, of course, all this stuff off before you finish. And I think that's mainly because the alternator is just not keeping up. I mean, it's enough to stop it from discharging the batteries 100%, but it's not enough to really charge the batteries up very fast. It's, how should I explain that? I can explain this better. Give me a second here. All right, so instead of 100% of your alternator power going to charging the batteries, it's sending like 90% of the alternator power is running this and that. So you only got 10% on your batteries. Well, you're still trying to charge your batteries up from starting it, and these Cummins here, they really like their cranking power. So if we put a bigger alternator on this, which we will eventually, I think that would help our problems quite a bit. And then I'm going to have to get an ammeter with better range because, like I said, it pegs out at 60 regularly when you are running everything. But it'll run all day. It does a good job. It doesn't constantly cut out or anything. As long as your batteries are fully charged, when you start, you're good. Now, if you start with half-ass batteries and your tractor starts kind of sluggish, you're going to have a little bit of issue here. And it's not really worth, this is the other thing, you fire this up, you run it. If you're only going to run it for 15 or 20 minutes, it's not worth turning this stuff on. It's just not. That's kind of an irritating thing. But, you know, if we're only going to run it for 15 or 20 minutes, even if it's hot outside, you know, we can live with it if need be. Generally, when this thing starts and runs, it runs for several hours at a time, like most tractors do. So other than that, there's really no complaints about it. If you mount it better, you don't have condensation falling into the cab. If you have a real alternator on your tractor, you won't drain your batteries down. Keep your filters and stuff clean. You get good airflow through it as much as it can produce. There is a filter here underneath this panel. I have never taken it out and cleaned it. I need to. That should tell you how good I am on maintenance around here. Goodness. Of course, I have all this stuff around here to maintain. I mean, come on, man. I'm busy. But anyway, I do need to take that out and clean it. That would probably help a little bit with the airflow. And then to clean it, up here, there are 2 screws on each side of this cover. You pull them out, you take this plastic cover off, and then you have access to everything up there. Now, I said this was 134A refrigerant. There are service ports on this, so if you need to charge it, you can. As it concerns service parts, I'm not sure. I don't remember. I think you can call Velit, their customer support, and they'll sell you parts for this, but I don't know what parts they will sell you, and I could be wrong on that. I could be thinking of something else I was looking at the time I found this. But yeah, servicing it's not bad. You just need to blow it out with compressed air occasionally. The way this is designed, it doesn't suck up a heck of a lot of dirt. You know, it's not bad. I only cleaned this once since we put it in, and it wasn't really that dirty, and it's running plenty of dust. Believe you me, it doesn't take much to get dust out here in the red dirt country. So, yeah, and then your electrical hookup, like I said, is pretty simple. You just tie these cables onto your battery, and since it's a 12 volt, you only need to do it on one battery. I don't know if on the 24 volts they send you 2 sets of wires and you hook them up in series. I imagine you'd about have to, because that's how you would get 24 volts, because each of these batteries is 2 12 volts. So it's 24 volt starting system, but the rest of the electrical is 12. But I don't know. We ordered the 12 volt unit because we figured that would be enough. If we had to do this again, I would probably say let's order the 24 volt unit. Let's get a heavier alternator. It's going to run at a lower amperage, and we'll be fine. We'll actually be better off. It should run a little bit better that way if we were going to do it again. But this works just fine as it is. A couple other things I'll mention here real quick, and then we should be able to end the video. Some of you may be wondering if you could put this on like a truck, like a semi. Maybe you can see that semi over there in front of the red trailer. Yeah, you can, and it wouldn't be a big deal to do it. The only problem is, and this is the reason I don't really like these, you have to cut a hole in the roof. And I don't care how good a hole you cut and how good that seal is, eventually it's going to leak. Eventually. Now, it may take longer. It may leak sooner rather than later, depending on how good a job you did. But I'm not a fan of cutting holes in the roofs of much of anything for any reason. Sometimes you have to, I get that, but this would for damn sure work on a truck. If you could get it mounted and it wouldn't cave your roof in and you could keep it solid, oh yeah, it'd definitely keep you cold. The only issue with that is that the air comes down from the top rather than through the vents on a truck, and so your airflow is a little screwed up. You'd have to have some auxiliary fans, but yeah, it would absolutely work, and it's pretty simple to hook up and all that. So, other thing I'll mention, the price. This was about $1,800, and that was with $100 in freight and taxes combined. So it took about a month to get here. Not sure if it was just coming on the slow boat or if it was because it came from California and they were having some issues with, you know, I don't know, freight or whatever at the time, just because of unions or whatnot. I don't know, but it took a month to get here. And about $1,800 later, we have a good unit in the tractor. Was that worth that price? In my opinion, yes. And if I remember right, and my memory's a little fuzzy here, I'll admit, but when I found this, when we were looking at it, talking about getting it compared to other stuff, there were several things in favor that we liked. Number one, it was the cheapest one I could find. Number two, it was completely self-contained. Number three, it was 12 volt. It had 12 volt option. And those were some of the big considerations that we had. The other thing was, this is 8,000 BTUs. Again, that's like a small air conditioner for a house. It's pretty serious, and that's what we wanted. We wanted something way overkill to compensate for how should I say this? We wanted something overkill that would compensate for the lack of insulation in the cab and all the glass. You know, we didn't want to play around. We were tired of sweating and eating dirt. And this thing has delivered. It's done a good job for us. We don't regret buying it or anything. Yeah, it's a little pricey. Maybe there was a cheaper option out there somewhere, but I couldn't find it. And anything that was cheaper, initially, it ended up being just as expensive because, like I said earlier in the video, you would have had to run an auxiliary compressor. You would have had to run an auxiliary condenser. Well, the condenser would have gone here in the front. Maybe you would have had to have an evaporator and blower motor unit, and you would have still had to run lines and say, well, they send lines with them. Well, maybe, but I mean, good grief. That would have actually ended up being slightly more expensive, if not way more expensive. And again, the biggest thing was time. By the time the budget opened up for us to get this, we were running out of time. And since it said it was going to take about a month to get here, and that went for just about anything I was looking at, and that, you know, back in June of 24, yeah, this was our best option. That's what we decided, and that's why we went with it. So if you go and check this out, and you decide that's too expensive, I don't want to buy it, I want to do something different, you go right on ahead. Oh, and it's direct current, not alternating current. That's another reason we went with it. So a lot of these camper units with the BTU rating we wanted, they were alternating current, because they were made for campers that would hook up at like a park or whatever with alternating current. We needed direct current because, well, you know, transformers and inverters that's just too much for these poor farmers. So anyway, all that stuff, those are things we considered. Those are things we looked at. Maybe prices have changed a year and a half later, but I don't think so. I imagine they're still pretty similar. So with all that being said, I believe that covers everything I cared to cover. Again, I'll have a link to the Velit unit down below if you want to go check it out, if it's still available. That could have been a fly-by-night Chinesium outfit that's gone now. I don't know. But if they're still around and they still have that model, I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. Highly recommend if you are interested in doing something similar to what we did here. And yeah, that's all I got. So I will get off of here. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, anything I didn't mention or anything I wasn't clear on, you go ahead and leave a comment and ask me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can with an answer. Thank you for watching. We'll see you later.